Welcome to Parallel Perspectives, conversations with leaders who don't just think differently, they build differently. I'm Nathan Trail. You know, what's interesting about career paths, sometimes the ones that make the least sense on paper end up teaching you the most. Today we're going to be talking with someone who studied environmental science. He tried his hand at sales and somehow ended up leading global IT strategy for Bridgestone. Along the way, he learned that technology decisions aren't really about technology at all. They're about people, customers, and knowing when to let your team fail safely. This one's a really good conversation. Today's guest is Tom Corridon, Chief Information Officer at Bridgestone, a global leader in tire manufacturing and mobility solutions. Tom's path to CIO wasn't linear. With an environmental science degree from the University of Iowa, he started in sales, stumbled into technology at Pitney Bowes, and gradually built a career that spans help desk support, network engineering, retail, IT leadership, and security, eventually rising to CIO. Along the way, he's cultivated curiosity, grit, and a business-minded approach to technology, ensuring IT isn't just keeping the lights on, but actively creating value for the organization. Beyond work, Tom draws leadership lessons from parenting, sustainability initiatives, and personal curiosity, offering a unique perspective on leading both people and technology. Tom, welcome to Parallel Perspectives. We're excited to dive into your story.
Thanks, Nathan. That was a lot, almost borderline embarrassing sitting here for 30 seconds listening to you go through that. But thank you. Good to be here.
We're excited. So you studied environmental science at the University of Iowa. If you don't mind, tell us, how did you end up in technology and IT leadership?
Yeah, good question. So obviously that was quite some time ago, graduating from college in the late 90s. Environmental science was something that you either probably needed to go on to law school or go to work for the government or some government agency. Neither of those paths really intrigued me at the time. So I went back to Chicago, went back home, and just started to look for, an open role, and did end up in a sales role. Obviously, I wasn't as skilled at sales as you are, so that path did not pan out. But it did give me an opportunity with Pitney Bowes, who, for those that don't know, manufacture mail processing machines, copy machines, fax machines, just basically office equipment. Tough sell because most people at the time already had one, right? So you had to try to convince people that they needed an upgrade or that they needed to buy something from me. So it was difficult. But what I did gravitate towards was they had a managed service kind of offering for different offices, and that included some of the technology that big law firms, big consulting firms in downtown Chicago were starting to lean into. And that's really where I got my first taste of technology and what the future held. And it was really interesting, exciting, and beat the daylights out of sales. So that's, I'd say, what got me really hooked on technology.
That's interesting. And I'd say, even though you didn't pursue the career in sales, you've clearly done a really excellent job at leveraging the characteristics of a good salesperson throughout your career path as you've taken on so many different roles. One of the things that's intrigued me is how you've kind of self-taught, and this is previous conversations we've had. I'm curious, how did self-teaching and early certifications shape your approach to learning and problem solving?
Yeah, I think it came from a place of genuine curiosity as opposed to like a syllabus of required learnings in a class. And so I think that in and of itself, when you're actually truly interested, you're charting your own path, you're choosing your own adventure kind of deal. I think that really gives you a different level of motivation and interest. And that's really, I think, what drew me in and really kept me going because, first of all, it was the 1900s, as my children like to remind me, even though it was 1998, right? But the opportunities were endless. It was just starting to really make, I would say, difference for business as far as technology and enabling communications and sharing of information in unique and different ways. And so, and it continues to evolve every day. After a very long career in technology, it never gets boring. So I think that's really what drew me in and called for the pivot in my career is just really the open-ended opportunities and the real curiosity that came from a place of real wonderment, I think, around what technology had to offer.
I think a lot of people don't understand who are not in technology. In order to be in technology leadership, one important characteristic is you have to be adaptable. Like you said, the certifications in the late 90s almost are irrelevant now to the certifications required to be in IT leadership today, especially at your level. I'm curious, has there been any certifications or early learnings that has stuck with you even 30 years later, from the late 90s, and what are some of those key lessons learned maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly having the foundation of ones and zeros, I still set my alarm for 5:12 from a binary code perspective every morning. It's such a weird, quirky thing, right? But that is something that stuck with me of like the binary language and just it's not about I don't need to know the binary language on a day-to-day basis, but it's a good reminder and grounding in the fact that it is based in something as simple as ones and zeros, yet you inject people and you inject, the economy and you inject all these other, facets of the world, and it makes it much more complicated than it actually is. And so I think some of those early certifications in basic computing, networking, those tend to ground me in what we're really talking about in conversations and put the technology to the side. We're talking about something that's a business problem, a business capability, something that needs an outcome that the person on the other side of the table desires. And so oftentimes the technology can cloud that conversation and honestly sometimes result in implementing a technology that actually didn't solve the business problem because people got all obsessed with the shiny object and they chased that as opposed to what is the actual problem, what is the process that you're going to take and change, and then how does technology, the basics of the ones and zeros, accelerate that for you.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back to the concept of chasing a shiny object versus actually solving a business problem. And I do feel like there's a joke in there somewhere around you setting your alarm to 5:12. I think there's probably a nerd dad joke or something like that.
Totally, totally.
But looking
I
back,
tried to explain to my kids, they didn't get it.
they didn't get it. Well, I get it. I think I'm in that generation. So going back on early parts of your career, coming to Bridgestone, how long have you been with Bridgestone? And there's some pivotal moments that maybe have led you towards this global brand, world renowned, driven by IT technology organization.
Yeah, so I've been at Bridgestone for 18 years, which is a very long time. And if you're not being adaptive and trying something new, you'll never stick around, right? So I'm happy to say that every 3 to 4 years, I was asked to do something different. And it wasn't always, a promotion. It wasn't always a big bump in comp or a big title change, but it was something different. And I think that kept me interested and engaged. I would say how I landed at Bridgestone was just happenstance. A friend from college whose dad was starting a help desk contract with Bridgestone. And again, it was right at that point in my life where I was starting to get really interested in technology. And so that opportunity came up just through a conversation with a friend and jumped on it. And I started out at the retail Firestone help desk, literally answering calls from store managers and store employees that had just gone from, an archaic system to a Windows based system. And so the questions were quite entertaining about a mouse and Windows as opposed to function keys. But that was really how I got started. But I think throughout that journey, that served me really well to have that foundational understanding from kind of the ground up, from the entry level, and really understanding then the full gamut and going across all the different disciplines. I feel like that rounded me out really nicely for the position that I'm in now.
Yeah, and you talked about working, because my understanding is you've held a lot of not just different leadership levels in Bridgestone, but various functional roles, from help desk to network engineer to the retail IT leader, eventually to CISO on the security side, and now you're at the CIO level. So are there, skill sets or strengths that has helped you navigate such a broad kind of random path?
Yeah, I would say certainly you mentioned adaptability. I think that I don't have the no fear bumper sticker, but I do think, that is part of it. You can't be afraid to take on a challenge. You can't be afraid to be uncomfortable. You have to be a little comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're not going to know everything when you go into a role, but you need to be really observant and probably really quiet for a little while, knowing you don't have the answers and you're in absorption mode. And so I think as you go into different roles in your career, it's important to be adaptable, to be humble, to have, as little fear as possible, and then really to be hungry for knowledge and information and curious.
I love the concept of, and I've used this before with my team, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And that concept, I cannot echo it enough and agree with you more, is just you don't learn, you don't really move forward with innovation if you're not uncomfortable, if you stay in that comfort zone. And it's about also understanding that your mentor's ceiling is your floor, right?
Yeah.
Don't stop at your mentor's ceilings or your leader's ceilings. Let that be your floor and build from that versus just trying to follow. So kind of on the concept of mentors, did you have in your early career mentors or moments that has guided your career trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always learn from people at whatever level, and all interactions with people in life are lessons of, good and bad, right? So I would say the cliche answer of I've learned both what to do and what not to do from different leaders in my career. But there are a couple of leaders that really stick out to me early in my career that really played a pivotal role. And it was about that. It had a lot to do with not having that fear. Like, I had early leaders in my career that told me, I would go to them and say, man, there's so many smart people in that room. I don't even know what the acronyms are that they're using. I don't even understand. And one particular mentor told me, they don't understand half of what they're saying either. It's okay. You can't be intimidated. You can't be afraid. Ask the practical question that everybody has on their mind, and you'll reset a meeting like that, or you'll reset a project plan. Some people are just too afraid and they just stick with, we set out this course, we charted it, we're going to stick with it. And oftentimes, very few people along the way ask the questions of, are we sure? Did we think about this? Is it still practical? So those were some really important, I think, coaching and advice that I got early on.
I think that's great. I found myself in this similar scenario when I was early in my career of, walking into a room of executives can be intimidating, but kind of humanizing them helps you put into perspective that A, they were in your shoes at some point, and B, they're still human and they're going to make mistakes, and there's a level of insecurity. And it's important, I think, not just for us as leaders, but for the people that we're leading to understand that we can be insecure sometimes too, even though we try as leaders to not show that as much, and to show a level of confidence. But at the end of the day, we learn from our mistakes, and as long as there's a level of humility, and from what I understand, you have a key value in your leadership style of being a servant leader, which means, you lean into the strengths of your team, and learn from your team as well. So I think that's super important, and I'm glad you called that out.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you used humility, because kind of what I said could be taken into like a cocky trailblazer going in and telling people that, you're going down the wrong path, and you have to navigate those waters carefully and tactfully to make sure you don't burn any bridges.
Agreed. So over years, you've described curiosity and grit as central to your approach. How do these qualities manifest inside of your own leadership style?
Yeah, I think curiosity is really, as a leader, you always have to preface it with, I'm just seeking to understand. I'm not like coming at you with these questions and trying to trip you up, right? So I oftentimes have to preface my questions with, I'm just genuinely interested. I want to understand how it works or how it's going to work. I'm not trying to, think I've got a better idea. And so I think when you come in with that sort of hat in hand curiosity, then people will start to brainstorm, right? And maybe you ask a question that nobody thought of, or they were so far into the details that they hadn't really looked at a bigger picture and thought about, well, what's that going to mean in 2 years? Or what team's going to support that? Or how's the technology going to change and evolve? And how is it going to fit in with this other upgrade that we know we've got coming? Whatever it is, right? I think having that curiosity is always healthy for any team environment. And it brings different perspectives with sometimes, hopefully, different unique thoughts. From a grit perspective, that's now we've gotten past, we're in the middle of it, right? We're gonna implement, we're gonna support day to day, um we're gonna run the shop. And so I think I really value people that um show up and roll up their sleeves and aren't afraid to dive in and put in the time and the effort. And grit is really about not giving up, right? And there's a lot of people that get frustrated, not just in technology, in you know algebra, for example, or in whatever job you have, or personal relationships in life. And if something's worth it, it's important to put the time and the effort and to not quit on it, to not give up. And so grit is for me figuring out, okay, I've tried this way, it doesn't work. Let me think about, look at, and try to come up with a different way, but I'm not giving up. I'm getting to the finish line. And so it's going to use all your tools in your toolbox to try to really muscle your way through it.
So you've you're very much a hands-on technologist in the sense of you've played the role, you've been in the roles, right? You've done the things, you've done the certs, and various leaders come through to the leadership level through various means. Some come from sales, some come from the partner side, but you've truly built your career in the ditches or digging ditches, sweeping floors, all the way up. So how do you balance that hands-on technologist with now guiding strategic IT initiatives for a global organization?
Yeah, let's be clear. I don't make technical decisions. I'm not qualified. If I were the smartest person in the room on a given day of a topic, we'd have a problem on our hands. And I'm completely open about that. I don't have an ego about that. I really, what I try to do is to be the most rounded person in the room, or grounded, either rounded or grounded. Meaning I'm thinking bigger picture, I'm thinking wider scale, I'm bringing a business perspective, I'm thinking about something as tactical as, have we thought about the fact that we've got an epic sale that weekend? Or have we thought about the fact that, it's a plant shutdown on this holiday, and as soon as we come out of it, there's going to be a ramp up time, and they're going to need 2 weeks to get back to full production. Those kind of business aspects of the technology conversation is what I try to add, and then grounded in reality. And you know, Nathan, you've been around technologists for your whole career as well. People get real passionate about technology. They get real excited, and you don't want to dampen that excitement, right? You want that. That's an important energy to bring to a team, but you also need to ground in reality of what is really achievable. How much value will we really get from that? What is the differentiation for our situation, for our company, for our customers? Where does the differentiation come in? And it's not just that it's the upper right hand quadrant and the best of breed and the shiniest of the objects, but really, how do we make sure it delivers the right value for our organization?
So how do you do that? How do you encourage a global team who's scattered all over to remember the business value, and how do you connect those technology decisions? Maybe even give an example of how you connect the technology decisions to the true business value and Bridgestone's mission.
Yeah, I think it's internal versus external. For that's my approach. There are efficiencies and there are things that will benefit the company internally that are important. And I think sometimes we over-index on those internal things. And really, where we need to be focused is externally. What's that going to mean for the customer, for the person in the store buying those set of tires, for the person, that's signing up for that fleet service that we offer, for that dealer that we're selling inventory to? What is that going to do? Is it going to make their invoicing process simpler? Does it make the search and the lookup of inventory more efficient, faster, or better? How does it make us easier to do business with? Those are the questions that I like to bring and ask, and my leaders on my team, my direct reports, that's really their role as well, is to bring that in their different portfolios and ask those questions without crushing souls, without making the technologist walk away with their tail between their legs, because we need their brains, we need their drive, we need their innovative spirit. But sometimes you have to carefully just recalibrate on what's that going to matter to our customer, our end user, and really just the products that we serve society with. How is it going to make it better?
Yeah. And I love that you take a position of people first. I think that is a very very important value that you hold, and I can see that in you. When you're dealing with the team, so there's the one element of having fulfilled the Bridgestone mission to its customers, but then there's also the internal return of revenue and then sustainability. So on the two topics of revenue and sustainability, I know they're a little bit different, but kind of that same theme of how do you help your team understand decisions they're making or you're making, and the tie to revenue impact and the tie to sustainability.
Yeah, I think the first thing is really sharing or oversharing information. My boss, who's the CEO across the Americas and EMEA, he shares a lot of information to us about our financials, our performance, and there's a lot of different markets of sizes of tires and different geographies that we're competing in. So I think sharing really kind of where we stand, what our most profitable pieces of business are, just really being open and transparent of sharing, here's how we create value as a company. And so then that leads to, if people can have that understanding, then they start to design solutions and capabilities that serve that, right? As opposed to, I created this really cool internal SharePoint site. Like, okay, that's helpful and that's good, and hopefully our internal teammates appreciate and use it. But what is that going to do really for the categories of business that I shared with you? And sometimes that can be overwhelming. And so you have to be, um, you have to deliver the right amount of information. You've got to frame it in the right way. Like that's been my biggest learning being with Bridgestone for as long as I have. I've understood the business, but really now being at the leadership table with all of the other executives that drive the business, boy, there's a lot of detail that goes into how we derive a forecast, how we really look at our business. And so boiling that down and sharing the right level with the IT group is really important. But I think if people don't understand the value chain and don't understand the business, they'll really struggle with keeping that top of mind and delivering services, capabilities, outcomes that are going to matter to our business and our value chain.
And I thank you for sharing that, because I too have to remind myself, because sometimes I'll get so caught up in just kind of going 110 miles per hour focused on a task or 100 tasks. I forget that it's important that to over communicate and share why we're doing things. Why are we doing things? What's the bigger vision to get to where we need to be versus this is your task and go do it. So, and I think that's very important to remind leaders out there that, your team doesn't always know what you know. You can't just assume that. And I think a lot of times we forget that.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about serving the mission. You're serving the mission of Bridgestone. If you're doing something, why are we doing it? Does it move the ball forward? So I think those are really key takeaways, Tom.
Yeah, and that mission's not just about, top line growth and AOP and return on invested capital. It really is serving society with superior quality. That is the simple mission statement of Bridgestone, and it's been that way for over 100 years. And so that includes sustainability, like you mentioned, and that does include and sustainability. Everybody goes to green and ecological, but sustainability is also about how do we as a company remain sustainable? How do we give people products that they can keep for longer, that are more durable, that last longer, those are the things and the concepts that we as a technology organization need to be supporting our business in.
Especially for you guys, Bridgestone, where you're in the business of, creating, rubber tires that a lot of times you might not align to sustainability, but just by getting to know your organization more and more through our partnership, you guys truly have a very strong passion for ensuring you build sustainability into everything you do, from retreading to
Yep.
recycling. And I'm actually very impressed, especially compared to some of your competitors, at how important that mission is for Bridgestone.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you've been to Japan many times, Nathan, and I know you enjoy it as much as I do. And
Yeah.
it's a big part of culture in Japan of that sustainability. It's a small island, and they've got to maintain sustainability for their society. So you mentioned, some of the things, and it's not just propaganda and it's not just marketing. It truly is in practice, to take a carcass of a tire and to retread it two, three times for a fleet customer. We're not only saving that fleet customer money and making their fleet run more efficiently, but we're also reusing that same carcass and retreading the tire and getting the most useful life out of it. And that circularity of manufacturing, then once it is finally end of life, what happens? Well, those materials go into playgrounds, they go into roads, they go into shoes, they go into energy that is recreated with that for future manufacturing. So it is a part of the DNA, and it really has been from day one.
Yeah, it's quite impressive, the innovations you guys have done there, not just influencing your own, but influencing others in that same industry that you guys have kind of paved the way in. Switching gears a little bit. So in a past conversation, you've mentioned parenting, because you're a father, as a lens for leadership. So curious, how has that influenced how you lead teams?
Yeah, and you mentioned it. You stole my thunder a little bit just a minute or two ago. It's about reminding yourself that your team at work, as well as your children at home, they don't know all the things that you know, right? And so it's your job to be empathetic when, and not just get upset or be frustrated when they didn't understand the context or the background or the full story of the choices that they made. And so, making sure you're coaching them along the way, you're teaching, right? I think that's a big part as a leader. One, I think leaders should always be learning, but two, leaders also then need to be teaching. And that's a big part of both home and personal life and professional life for me is how can I impart the knowledge that's going to make this human being successful, whether it's at their job or in life or in school or in baseball or in gymnastics or whatever, right? How can I constantly be helping and imparting knowledge? Not that I know everything, right? Like I'm not claiming that at all, but I think giving that knowledge, but also giving the grace to know that they don't know everything, and two, that they're going to fail, right? And as long as you can set up an environment where they can fail safely, and you're there to provide the landing spot or be the catcher, when they fall, that's important for me, both across business and home. You mentioned mentors earlier, and I had a really great mentor a number of years ago. It was when I first moved from Chicago to Nashville and was just kind of getting um, into the business here in Nashville, out of singularly focused on retail in Chicago. And he told me that he said, my goal is to be the same person, right? Who I am at home is who I am at work. Otherwise, it's too much work and it's too difficult, and you lose your authenticity. And that's something that stuck with me as well. Around, I'm the same Tom at home as I am at work. To a certain degree, right? You've got to
Sure.
have differences, but how I show up is as much the same as it possibly can be. And how you coach, mentor, help, teach, and remove roadblocks for members of my team at work or members of my team at home. It's the same.
And I love what you said, failing safely. Like failing safely is such a great phrase that is now going to be quoted to Tom Corridon. But I, I think it's also easier said than done as a parent myself. I've, especially like you mentioned doing algebra earlier, trying to teach my kids algebra. First off, the curriculum today is nothing like what it was when I was in school. But second of
You don't
all,
like new math?
oh my gosh, I don't even know how to spell that.
Old math's right there in the middle. It's just got all this stuff around it.
I hate it. Absolutely hate it. But I find myself holding back, giving away the answer versus and trying to rush through something as a parent, trying to using algebra as an example, and sometimes having to remind myself that it's not my job to get them to the answer. It's my job to help them learn so that they can do it in the future. And so I'm curious your parallels to that at work from being a parent. Are you strong at that, or is it an area you're constantly reminding yourself and opportunities? So
No, I think inherently I'm relatively strong at it, and I think um, again, I'm not the person in the room that has the answers. I'm not the person that should always be presenting on a topic. People need to step up, and sometimes it'll be a little bumpy and a little bit rocky, and maybe they'll be incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly nervous in a scenario or a situation like that at work, presenting in a boardroom. But that's okay. If I continued to just take it and present it, nobody else would be learning, and nobody else would be kind of getting through that uncomfortable to get to be comfortable. And so that's, I mean, I don't let them, I'm there to support. If it goes off the rails, I'm able to, help rein it back in and make sure that we're focused on, the points that we want to get across. But that's one example of, I don't want to always be the one to have to talk on a topic or represent IT at a board level. It needs to be the voice of, honestly, the people that are more qualified than I am to talk about the subject matter. They just need to kind of battle through that uncomfortable part. And sometimes that can be bumpy. But you know what? Like you said earlier, everybody else in that room went through the same thing at some point in their career. And so if you don't have empathy for somebody, that, I don't know, that's not cool. Like you need to give people grace.
I agree. My struggle has always been balancing the level of empathy and grace to speed and, having to make business decisions in a timely manner. It's like I've not perfected that balance. Like that's an area I have to continue to work on. And I'm curious if you have any recommendations on how do you balance empathy and letting someone fail safely versus is this person actually capable and do we need to move faster?
Yeah, I think I mentally categorize those things because there are things that somebody can do that maybe aren't as impactful, right? Or there's either is that going to make a difference in 12 months or 18 months? If the answer is no, well then okay, maybe we can learn in that space right now and we can fail safely. Whereas if they're bigger, broader, more sweeping decisions that have a much longer tail of an impact, or they are much more immediate and they have an impact, tomorrow on our company or our teammates or our people or our customers, those are the decisions or things that we need to make sure we're doing right and treating carefully. But there's plenty of those are, if honestly, that they're the 20 in the 80/20 rule, Nathan, right? Like 80% of the stuff is a safer environment for people to learn in, and you just have to be careful on that 20 that's either going to have a really long-term impact or a short-term decision that's detrimental to the quarter or the year or whatever that might be.
So tying the two parallels together, the one on embracing curiosity and failing safely, and then also the sustainability message. How do you inspire your team to embrace that curiosity beyond tech and into more business and environmental thinking? Are there certain things that you use or techniques or exercises that you could recommend? And especially
Yeah.
with things like the rubber sources, like is it guayule cactus and the impact there? I mean, those things kind of some going back to innovation and sustainability. How do you do that as a business leader and as a tech leader?
Yeah, you butchered that word. It's
I
Waiuli.
what is it? Guayule?
Waiuli, yeah. It's a tough
Guayule.
one.
Yeah. Well, it's spelled
Um,
guayule. I was hooked on
it
phonics as a
is.
kid.
The E is just long at the
Oh,
end. No, I think an important part of our mission statement in Bridgestone is a Japanese phrase called Genba Getbutsu, right? Which means basically to go out and to experience firsthand.
I'm gonna butcher
And
that one too.
yeah, we would call it a Genba walk, right? That's really what it is. That's an easier way to say it. But Genba Getbutsu is really to go and experience firsthand and not rely on second or third hand knowledge of a situation. And so that is a really important thing that we stress throughout the company. Our executives, are always in plants, in retail stores, you know, putting their finger on the pulse of the business, getting closest to the teammates on the front lines that are dealing with the customer every day. And for IT, I encourage the same thing. Get out to a retail store, see what the pain points are of that store manager or the manager of tire services or the service manager in the back, whatever that is, get out there and figure out how technology could enable making that better. Right. And I think the same for anything sustainable, right? Um, Go to Akron, meet with our PhDs, our scientists, our white coats. Those are the people that every day are designing products with sustainability in mind. How are they doing it? That'll be very interesting. How can we help them? Are there are there technologies that we can put into their hands to make it more efficient and effective? in their everyday life of really driving that, that dantatsu, another Japanese term of, clear leader in the product space. And how are we making sure that they're doing that, you know, as best that, as efficiently as they can, and how are we helping them?
You've definitely got
So
me. Good.
it's important to just get out there, right? And experience it firsthand, because it's so easy to put headphones on and sit behind a keyboard, and not really understand how things are happening out on the front lines, how Bridgestone is interacting with the world.
Genbei got Batsu. Genbei got Batsu. Did I say that right?
Let's call it a Genba walk.
Genba walk. The Genba walk. Getting out there. That's a new one for me. And you definitely have me beat on the Japanese phrases, I think. I've got a couple in there, but you've already outshined me in that space.
The most important is kanpai.
Kanpai. That is very important. That one I do know. And I've said it many, many times. Probably too many times,
Sure.
actually.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our last segment. This has been actually very intriguing. I've actually been writing stuff down, and you've already taught me a lot, so I'm hoping others have taken away great nuggets. Moving into our last segment, fast takes. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions with some quick answers, starting with one word that describes your leadership style.
Transparency.
That's a good one, and I definitely took that away from our discussion. All right, next one. Favorite lesson learned from a career misstep?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would say, um, being a hero or trying to take it all on solo was a lesson that I learned, and I still learn. If I'm being honest, on a daily basis, there's still times where I'm like, it'd just be easier if I just did this and just bang it out, right? But that is not healthy, and honestly, it's burned me several times in my career where I didn't engage others or ask for help.
Yeah, that's a good one. Asking for help. And it also goes back to what you talked about earlier when, trying to teach your kid algebra. It's like, let them learn. So
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword. So that's great. What is the most underrated quality for IT leaders?
Uh, Negotiation.
I wasn't expecting that, but that's spot on, actually. Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Well, I think, we all get caught up with our teams in technology and deliverables and KPIs and, in roadmaps and everything like that. And I don't mean, the hot boxing of a partner on an hourly rate or whatever that means. I mean, like, really understanding partnerships and making sure that there's mutual value attained, through any sort of partnership. So I don't know if it's negotiation. It maybe is more partner management and really understanding, because I see throughout the industry, many people are seagull partner managers, meaning they just swoop in at contract negotiation time and then swoop back out, when I think it's important for leaders to be engaged throughout.
Yeah, getting to yes, or looking for the win-win, because if you're not successful, we're not successful, and vice versa type of attitude. So
Yep.
I think that's important. Outside of work, Tom, how do you recharge?
Yeah, I spend 4 hours every day driving my kids to different activities. No, I'm just
So
kidding.
you're an
It's
Uber
not.
driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think I really enjoy downtime, where, I could say hiking because we do that, or I could say golf because I massacre the golf course every
Yeah.
once in a
Yeah.
while.
You and me
But
both.
yeah, but I really enjoy like movie night, or I really enjoy like just, spending 2 hours with family or friends, and just, that to me is really unwinding and relaxing, where you don't have to think, you don't, you're just there enjoying something together.
Yeah, that's good. All right, last question, and one of my favorites. So if you were to pick a theme song for the Tom Corridon walk up, what would your walk up theme song be?
I would say, Seven Nation Army
Ooh,
by White
I like
Stripes.
that one.
That's like the pump you up one,
Yep.
right? That's the one that's going to really, I just love the beginning of that song.
Yep.
Um, I love that's my when I want my son to be pumped up, driving to a baseball tournament or whatever. That's
Throwing white
we'll
stripes.
jam that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I would say my second one, which is the other end of the spectrum, would be a theme song. Maybe not a walk-up song, but this is an old one. "Don't Worry, Be Happy" by
Oh
Bobby
yeah,
McFerrin.
yeah. I totally remember that. Bobby
Yeah.
McFerrin, yeah. That's a good one. All right, well, Tom, I really appreciate you being on the show. From help desk to CIO, Tom's story shows how curiosity, grit, and servant leadership can create transformative impact, not just in technology, but across business, sustainability, and people. His journey reminds us that the best leaders are always learning, adaptable, and deeply connected to both their teams and their mission. Is there any last comments you want to leave for the audience, Tom?
First, I would like to really thank you. I really enjoyed the hour we spent together, Nathan. I think it was a human conversation, which I greatly enjoyed. So I appreciate that. And I would say, to the listeners of this, it's a crazy world, VUCA world, right? Volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and I forget the A.
I forgot it too.
Ambiguous, I think.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's a crazy world. So I would just say people need to give themselves a break.
Yeah.
At any level, at any job, in any part of life, you're killing it. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a pat on the back, and get back up and go back at it.
That's awesome. Until next time, keep exploring. No fear. Genba walk. Stay curious and keep building boldly. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Nathan.